Hi again folks, welcome back to Meaningful Money. I'm still on my log, this will be the last one on here for now, and I'll move on to keep things a little bit more interesting. Excuse me. We're going to talk today about a horrible four-letter word, one that nobody really likes to think about, nobody really likes to talk about, and that is risk. Now risk is a broad subject, but particularly when we're talking in financial planning terms, we're talking primarily about risk of financial loss. There are other risks as well, but I'll come to those as they become pertinent. I think it's fair to say that it's well established that there is a link, a very strong correlation between risk and reward. I'll give you an example. Let's say all I have in the world is this crisp £5 note and 5,000 quid in my bank account. Right? Now, if I'm walking past Ladbrokes or Betfred or wherever, and I see an advert in the window for 5-1 odds for Manchester United to win their next football match, and I don't know squat about football, well, let's say I did, and I thought, that's a pretty sure bet, 5-1, and I think, well, I'll go in there and I'll put my 5 quid on. So I do that, and Manchester United do win, and I win 25 quid, 5-1 odds. Now I'm happy. I've bet 5 quid and gained 25. But ultimately, if I'd have lost that bet, I'd have lost 5 quid. Not really the end of the world. So my reward would have only been 25 quid, which would have been nice, but it's not going to make much difference either way. My possible risk was to lose 5 quid. Now let's say I think that's a really good bet, that Manchester United are definitely going to win that match. And I go into the bank and I draw my full £5,000 life savings out. And I hand that over to the girl at the till, and I make that bet with everything I've got. Now the risk is immense because I could lose everything I have, but the reward means I could quintuple my money. I could have 5 times as much money as I had before, 6 times if you include getting your stake back. So the risk is massive, but the reward potentially is massive as well. Now the ratio is the same, it's a 5-1 bet, but the 5 quid in my pocket is neither in or there, and so is the 25 quid gain. But the £5,000 of my life saving is definitely here or there. If I lose it, it'd be a disaster, but the gain is potentially massive. So there is a link between risk and reward. To use another example, you ask your average smoker, they're well aware of the risks of lung cancer, but apparently there's a pleasure in smoking. Maybe just that makes it worth it, I don't know. Perhaps I shouldn't comment on that. Or an ugly guy walking up to the attractive girl in a bar, the possible rewards of him getting off with that girl probably outweigh the risks of her publicly humiliating him. In life, in every sphere of life, there is risk and reward. But in financial terms, as I say, we're talking primarily about financial risk, the loss of money. Now, risk, just a few things to say about risk at this stage really, because it's like all these things, it's a many varied subject, and I'll keep referring back to it as time goes on. But here are just a few things to consider about risk at this early stage. If risk in this context is risk of financial loss, you can mitigate that, i.e. you can reduce risk in 3 ways. The first way is to spread your money around. Common sense this, it's what your mum told you. Don't keep all your eggs in one basket. If you have many baskets with eggs in, if you drop one of the baskets, you've still got plenty of eggs in your other baskets. So we call that diversification, spreading your money around, not just into lots of pots, but lots of pots which behave differently. So that if one of them has a bad day, chances are another one is doing okay, and maybe the two can balance each other out. So diversification. The second way you can reduce risk is time. In the last video I talked about cash being short term. That's because there's no risk really with holding money in cash. But in investment terms, if you hold money for a long term, well, the risk of you losing on it reduces. There's been plenty of studies to show, particularly with shares, equities, that the longer you hold them, the chances of you making money are better. Doesn't always work, but in 9 times out of 10 and more than that, it does. So time in the market, not the time you get in and the time you get out, that's a mug's game, but the length of time you stay invested is a good way of reducing risk. The third way is review. If you have a portfolio of investments, set them up on day one and then leave them for the rest of your life and never review them, well, that portfolio is at a higher risk of loss than one which is actively managed and reviewed over time. So 3 ways: diversification, time, and review. A couple of other things to say about risk. You should always take the minimum amount of risk necessary to achieve your aims. Now this harks back to beginning with the end in mind. You don't ever invest for its own sake, you invest with a plan in mind. That's what this whole site is about. And if you don't need to take any risk to achieve your aims, then don't take any risk. What's the point? You're just being greedy. You're after the reward, but the risks are not worth it. If you've got everything you need, or if you can get everything you want in life by taking 0 risk, then take 0 risk, for goodness sake, right? And I think hang on. See, my eyesight's going. I got notes just underneath the camera. Okay, can't read that last point. One good way to find out how you feel about risk is to ask, how would you feel if you lost 5% of your money? Doesn't sound very much, does it? How about 10%? How about 20%? This is something I always ask my clients and new clients when we're putting a portfolio together for them. I say, look, I'm going to be back here in 6 months' time asking you and reviewing this portfolio. If I come back and say that you're 10% down, are you going to want to kill me or not? And some will say, yes, absolutely, I would kill you if it's 10% down, in which case I might just adjust my proposals a little bit. Or they might say, well, you know, I understand that investing, things are going to go up and down, but over the long term it should be okay. That's fine. So ask yourself, when it comes to investing or building your financial plan, how much would you be prepared to lose? And the final thing to say is risk is such an important area because it sets the parameters for your financial plan. If you have an advisor who doesn't even cover this, or even worse, says something like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much risk are you prepared to take with your money? Because everybody always says 5. If you've got an advisor that asks a question like that, you need to sack him or her and move on to a better one. Risk is a really important conversation. Part of the skill of a financial planner is to really assess and use scientific tools very often to measure a client's tolerance for risk. So risk is important. Get it right and the benefits speak for themselves. Get it wrong well, if you're a financial advisor, you could have a lawsuit on your hands, but you could also be very disappointed and not achieve your financial aims. So risk is important. Remember those key points at this stage, and we'll keep coming back to risk as we go on. Coming up, we're going to be talking about investments. This is going to take us a little while because there are many kinds of investments that need explaining, but the next video is going to be an introduction to how to invest money. Stay tuned and thanks for watching.